Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Could be that we'll need maybe an annual booster. Maybe it will just be for people who are most at risk.
Say hello to a spring booster vaccine program in BC, and goodbye to showing your vaccine passport in many places.
At some point, we had to move forward. This is as good a time as any.
Also,
many climate experts say this is the leading climate plan in North America.
as scientists warn we are running out of time to tackle climate change.
We promised to reduce oil and gas emissions in the province, but we don't have a plan to do that yet.
Where does BC's plan rank? And
this place has a special spot in my heart.
back to the Nat. The Vancouver Canadians hit the field ahead of opening day and a year away.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away this week. BC is taking the next steps in its COVID-19 response, launching another booster campaign and lifting even more restrictions. As Belle Puri tells us, one of the last major protections against transmission will soon be gone.
Vaccine cards will no longer be required to get into public events or places like restaurants. On Friday, the government order will be rescinded, but businesses, if they want, can continue to ask for proof of vaccination.
For us, we take off the vaccines so people can go more at the restaurant. If other people complain, we'll put it back. But I think the best is take it off and try it out.
As one precaution against COVID spread is out, another is in. BC has introduced another shot for those 70 and older and vulnerable groups. Experts say the older we get, the faster the vaccine wanes.
The rest of us who have had our booster already have good, strong protection from that still. So I don't foresee that in the near future.
Fourth dose vaccination programs have already started at some long-term care homes. Invitations for others who are eligible will be sent out shortly.
There's been excellent uptake amongst those over 70, and it will be our expectation as invitations go out over the next period for people when they reach, when the interval period passes from the last booster dose. I'm expecting a high degree of uptake.
At the end of the week, the province will also get rid of COVID-specific safety plans and return to communicable disease plans. As well, it'll lift the post-secondary residence vaccine requirement.
That if we were waiting for the numbers to be extremely low, if not at or near zero, before we were to lift mandates, I think that will not happen for some years. So at some point, we had to move forward. This is as good a time as any.
Health officials say BC is in a good place right now, even though there's been a slight uptick in COVID cases. Independent virus modelers have said it's too early to say if BC is in a sixth wave of the pandemic, but urge caution as cases trend upward. The highly contagious Omicron BA2 variant now accounts for 70 to 75% of all new infections. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Today's fourth dose announcement comes as hospitalizations in our province continue to climb. BC is reporting yet another increase today with 13 more COVID-positive patients in hospital. The number of people in critical care is down by at least one. Outbreaks, though, have nearly doubled since last week, with 2 more facilities reporting outbreaks for a total of 12 now. The province will provide an update on deaths on Thursday, and it will stop providing daily figures. RCMP in Kelowna say a man has now been arrested and charged with murder in the death of a young security guard. 24-year-old Harmandeep Kaur was killed after someone attacked her on the UBC Okanagan campus in late February. At the time, police said the suspect worked at the university. This afternoon, Mounties announced 22-year-old Dante Ognibene Heborn of Kelowna is charged with second-degree murder. He's set to appear in court tomorrow. Kaur's family says she came to Canada from India in 2015 and was excited about getting an education. She'd recently received her permanent residency and was working to save money for school. An urban farming project in Vancouver set to break ground on the site of a former orphanage has found possible evidence of unmarked graves. The Park Board is now doing an archaeological assessment at Burrard View Park near New Brighton Park. Almost 100 years ago, the park was home to the Wall Street Orphanage. The Urban Food Forest Foundation found grounds for concern.
That we will get in touch with the local nations, Musk and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We will be doing more research into the site and making sure we understand the history, and that will guide us in the archaeological investigation that we're doing.
In 1927, a 14-year-old Indigenous boy is known to have died of pneumonia at the orphanage. If Burrard View Park is found to have unmarked graves, all work to bring in the urban food forest will stop. The province is looking to buy more land around transportation hubs, and it wants to use it for affordable housing. Changes to the Transportation Act would allow the government to purchase land not just for developing transit projects themselves. Officials say they want to build affordable housing in an area where transit is easily accessible, as well as mixed-use buildings like childcare centres, shops and schools. The Transportation Minister says the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain route will be a big focus.
Recall perhaps the Canada Line in Vancouver. A lot of missed opportunities at stations there for densification, and a couple that were done retroactively but did not include affordable housing. We're doing things differently on the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain.
The government says building housing near transit hubs has proven to increase transit use. Ridership rose by 35% at the Marine Drive Canada Line station after more housing went up. We have yet another dire warning that time is running out to act on climate change. This week's UN report from the Intergovernmental Working Group says governments are failing to meet their own climate pledges. And as the CBC's Michelle Gassoub explains, BC is among them.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the IPCC report revealed a litany of broken climate promises by governments, Canada and BC not an exception.
Sadly, Canada is among the 10 biggest polluters globally, and comparing our emissions trends with other G7 countries, for example, we are hopelessly last.
In BC, emissions have gone up every year reported since 2015, though the province maintains its climate plan is world-class.
Many climate experts say this is the leading climate plan in North America. 2 former members of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have said these are detailed roadmaps to meet our targets, and I'm going to continue to do my best to ensure that we remain world leading, Canada leading.
We asked an expert how BC's climate promises are stacking up.
It's a fair statement in terms of the content of the policy and the aspirations embedded in those policies, but not in terms of either what the direction of our emissions or the actual guts of policy itself. For example, we promised to reduce oil and gas emissions in the province, but we don't have a plan to do that yet.
BC outperforms other provinces in some areas by using hydropower and increasing the number of electric vehicles on the roads. But the province's weak spot, subsidies for fracking wells and new LNG terminals.
Those things are all quite admirable, but again, that natural gas beast is lurking out there and needs to be addressed, especially post-2030, for BC to be able to make a good commitment to global climate efforts.
Experts warn the emissions released by natural gas projects would put BC's targets out of reach.
It's heartbreaking because the evidence is overwhelming that we have so little time left.
Oh, that's officially the craziest thing I've seen fire-wise.
If global emissions don't come down, BC will see more warming and more extreme weather. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the day after the UN's report came out, scientists are sharing even more worrying projections for our region here on the Pacific Coast. They warn of a future filled with cascading disasters that we've already endured. Extreme heat, then extreme rain. And as Renee Filipponi tells us, that could lead to more heavy flooding and the risk of landslides.
It was a natural disaster that swallowed California neighborhoods in 2018. More than 20 people were killed when heavy storms unleashed mudslides on Montecito. It happened 1 month after the state's most destructive wildfire season.
This is something that is so damaging to communities, so it can, it affects so many people and it takes so long to recover from these events.
Researchers say climate change is going to make these combination weather events increasingly common. A study published in the journal Science Advances says by the end of the century, post-wildfire extreme rainfall events will increase by up to 100% in California and nearly 700% in the U.S. Pacific Northwest, an area with a similar climate to southern BC. Merritt faced 2 major emergencies last year. First, forest fires put people on evacuation alert in the summer. Then, months later, floodwaters devastated the city.
Part of the reason the flooding was so bad was because that rain fell on slopes that had been weakened because of the heat wave and forest fires.
Hundreds in Merritt are still out of their homes, and reports like that one paint a dire picture for the future.
They absolutely keep me up at night, and I think about them a lot. And so do our citizens, and especially our citizens that are moving back into their homes.
Researchers in BC say this latest forecast is a worst-case scenario, but more needs to be done to prepare for and fight against climate change.
The projections that they have for mid-century, well, those are pretty similar no matter the climate scenario we look at. And so just the fact that we're looking at, maybe a doubling of these heavy rainfall following forest fire events just in the next few decades, that's worrisome enough.
And after a year of unprecedented destruction in BC, worse is not something the region is ready for. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Time to bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe with our first glimpse at the forecast. Decent day here on the South Coast, a bit blustery, Joe, but my goodness, some very wintry weather north of here.
Yeah, that's right. And the mountain passes in the south still recovering from that 35-centimeter snow dump. And right now, let me take you to the satellite and radar. We are hearing reports from Drive BC of freezing rain and ice accumulating around the Prince Rupert area. So definitely take your time on the roads. Highway 16. A potential for some ice as a new system moves in. And I've left a lightning detector on. You can see this is an unstable atmosphere. So we are getting lightning strikes along the central and northern coastal sections. And even around Prince George, you'll have quite a night with chance of thunderstorms in the next couple of hours. And we're seeing some just east of the city. And then chance of flurries. Those are moving in from the west as we speak. Similar setup for the interior as well. And we've still got those winds coming in from the west. Quick look at how those winds are doing as we speak. Kelowna right now, 43-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts. We've been seeing them up around 50, 60 for the better part of the day. Victoria, those winds finally easing, topping out around 100 kilometers per hour for parts of the peninsula last night. And Vancouver, many of you wanted to know when you could put their cycling out because things were so gusty, coming in at around 50, 60, 70 kilometers per hour for Metro Vancouver. So that's all thanks to that cold front that will continue to track east. A much more stable Wednesday in the cards for most of the province. Down to a 2 tonight. It's going to be a cold start to your Wednesday. Look at that, 12, mixed sun and cloud. You'd almost think it was spring or something.
Well, if you ask leading scientists, sure, but where are they when we need them?
Especially this time of the year.
That's for sure. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Burnaby RCMP is investigating a string of sexual assaults near Metrotown, all believed to have happened within a 24-hour period last week. The first was inside the Metrotown Superstore around 1 p.m. last Thursday. 2 similar reports of assaults on women followed Friday morning. The suspect is said to be a white man in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing a red V-neck Canada top with a maple leaf logo on it. Officers say all 3 assaults happened inside stores, and the suspect was not known to the victims. BC's police watchdog says it is facing a severe staffing shortage, an added challenge when it is also swamped with cases. Between April 1st and 3rd, the Independent Investigations Office was notified of 6 new incidents. 2 of those involve police-involved shootings. The Chief Civilian Director says there are currently they are short 6 frontline investigators, and the ongoing issue has caused caseloads to double over the past 2 years. He says attracting and keeping staff is part of that challenge.
The problem is that our base salary is some $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 less than what local police forces are paying, for example, and our people are unable to make overtime.
Salaries are tied to the Public Service Act. McDonald is asking for a change to the legislation that would further distance the IIO from government, making it more independent. BC's busy film and TV sector could be in for a hit. The provincial chapter of the Directors Guild of Canada has now called for a strike vote after talks with studios reached an impasse. The Guild represents about 1,700 film workers here who have been without a contract for more than a year. It's the first strike vote in their history, and job action would have far-reaching impacts on the industry. The union is calling for members to vote in favor of a strike. Wages and compensation for COVID-19 testing are major sticking points.
I think, first of all, one of the main and central issues is that we're very mindful that we represent the lowest paid, entry-level workers in the industry, and we take that responsibility really seriously. So our production assistants, our trainees, those coming into our assistant director and location departments. And we really hope that our member support of their bargaining team will serve as a tool to get us a fair deal that works for everybody.
Upton notes the Guild has bargained in good faith, but accuses the studios of shifting the goalposts. Voting starts tomorrow morning and lasts 2 days. We are down to the regional quarterfinals in our search for BC's best small town. It's the Sweet 16, you might say, and voting today is all about the Southwest. You have until 10 p.m. each night to cast your vote online at cbc.ca/BC. Here's our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, with where things stand so far.
Small towns come in all shapes and sizes, but only 4 from the southwest of this province can make it to the quarterfinals of the search for BC's best small town. In the Battle of the Gulf Islands, Salt Spring defeated Maine, defeated Galliano, and now has the big lead on Gabriola Island to be king of the 2 sailing weight. But could another island join them? For weeks, we've talked about Cumberland's comeback story in the Comox Valley, but it's Hornby Island with the narrowest of leads at the moment. The winner of that matchup will go on to the Vancouver Island final, and there it will likely face Ucluelet. After its big upset of Tofino, the coastal community has dominated this section of the bracket, up big against Cowichan Bay today. And in the 4th and final matchup, Sun Peaks has done well, but next to the bridge of the 23 Camels, it's Lillooet that could go all the way to the quarterfinals in the search for BC's best small town.
They make up just over half of Canadian auto sales, but did you know SUVs are up to 3 times deadlier for pedestrians in a crash than regular vehicles? We'll explain that startling statistic and what automakers are doing to address it. That's next. And thank you for being here on our commercial-free live stream this evening. In Manitoba, the Winter Fair is wrapped up for another year, and while the event saw a bit of a drop in attendance from previous years, organizers and attendees were all still happy with the show. The CBC's Riley Lachuk has more.
With one final lap around the ring, the curtain has closed on another Royal Manitoba Winter Fair.
And we're just overjoyed with the excitement and the people coming through the doors.
Past President Greg Crisanti says attendance this year was down about 20% since the last fair in 2019. It was cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. But the fair's return also marks one of the first major boosts to Brandon's economy in 2 years.
They're filling up with gas, they're staying at our hotels, they're going out to restaurants. It's just an amazing support.
Smile.
For Calgary equestrian Riley Rorison, the fair marked her first competition of the season.
I've been having a great time. It's like such a fun show. I love the environment. I like how people can come in and they can watch and they can meet our horses.
For her, it's not just about the shows or the interaction with the public. It's about reconnecting with old friends, some she hasn't seen for more than 2 years.
So my friends from Calgary and BC are here as well. So it's been nice to catch up with them and see them since I haven't seen them since show season has been down for quite a while.
It's that reconnection that Manitoba beef rancher Trevor's son also enjoys. He's seen more interest in local beef production during the pandemic and welcomes any opportunity to pull the curtain back and show people where their food comes from.
So many people are so disconnected from the farm, right? Like it used to be everyone's grandma and grandpa.
had a farm, you could go to Grandma and Grandpa's place and see cows or pigs or chickens or all that.
A rekindling he hopes sparks renewed interest in the family farm, so events like these thrive for years to come. Riley Lachuk, CBC News, Brandon.
More now in the new series here on CBC from Creator Network regular Yute Lee. He's exploring the issues in our community that impact us every day. Today, it's what's on our streets. Bigger cars are becoming much more popular. The problem is they're making the roads deadlier for other vehicles and pedestrians.
We're gonna try an experiment.
Now all around me are the wrong things, and I can spot a sucker when I take a swing. Hands full of memories and I can make them sing. Bring you to the promised land and let your bell ring.
An SUV or sport utility vehicle is 2 to 3 times more likely to kill a pedestrian in a collision compared to a regular car. Why? Well, it's a design issue. A key feature of an SUV is that it sits higher off the ground than most cars. If this car hits a pedestrian, its bumper is colliding with the person's ribcage and vital organs. But more importantly, it's directly hitting their center of gravity, which means this SUV is more likely to push the pedestrian forwards and run over them. Compare that to a regular car like the sedan. With its lower height, a sedan is more likely to clip a pedestrian's legs and send them flying on top of its hood, which is designed to be bouncy like a metal trampoline. Still very painful, but not as fatal. Now, many people are concerned about this because SUVs are actually becoming very popular. In 2020, the light truck segment of cars, which includes SUVs, pickups, and vans, accounted for 80% of new car sales in Canada, a share that's been growing for the last decade. At the same time, sedan sales have fallen off a cliff. The future of road traffic is looking very SUV, super unsafe for vertebrates. And the data is increasingly showing that. Pedestrian deaths have actually been increasing in recent years. According to a study by the OECD, Canada reported a 5.6% increase in pedestrian deaths between 2010 and 2018, while cyclists and drivers all saw decreases. But this trend is really apparent when you look at data coming from the US. Pedestrian deaths had been decreasing since the 80s, but in the last decade, they've been sharply rising again. Many are now pointing the finger at SUVs for playing a significant role in that increase. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, SUVs account for about a third of pedestrian collisions in the US, but closer to 40% of the fatalities. But there is another side to this story that I think is very important to get into. Why are people buying SUVs in the first place? SUV owners are among the most satisfied with their vehicles. According to a Volkswagen survey, 87% of them have no plans of ever buying another kind of car. There are many reasons behind this love affair: space, comfort, and flexing on minivan owners. But there's one reason that really stands out to me: safety. In a study of vehicle deaths between 2015 to 2018, sedans registered 48 deaths per million owners every year. That number for SUVs was 25, almost half. Dig deeper into the data and you see a clear trend. The bigger the vehicle, the less likely the risk of death for its passengers. You can see that in other large vehicles like minivans and pickup trucks. By that same token, smaller cars were more likely to be deadlier cars. The deadliest car in this study was the Ford Fiesta, a mini sedan which registered 141 deaths per million owners every year. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, who wrote this study, puts it plainly. A bigger, heavier vehicle provides better crash protection than a smaller, lighter one, assuming no other differences. An SUV is a bigger car, and that makes it a safer car. But that creates a whole new issue. A bigger car is also more dangerous to a smaller car. This concept is called crash incompatibility. In a crash involving two similar-sized cars, both vehicles inflict a similar amount of damage to each other. But when a crash involves a smaller car and a larger car, the smaller car is toast. A study from the University of California found that being hit by a vehicle that is 1,000 pounds heavier than your own is 40 to 50% more likely to be fatal. So here's the problem. More people buying SUVs is likely creating a feedback loop. It's the survival of the biggest. In a world where SUVs are becoming more and more popular, smaller vehicles become more dangerous, and people have a very compelling reason to buy a bigger car. In 2004, economist Michelle White wrote that drivers have been running an arms race by buying increasingly large vehicles. So there's clearly a dilemma here. I think it's understandable for people to want a car that is safer in an accident, but that desire is actually making our roads more dangerous. So I think the answer here is to ban them. Ban all SUVs. I'm not even kidding. Last year, the European Transport Safety Council recommended banning SUVs altogether in towns and cities across the EU. Cities like London, Paris, and Florence have considered restrictions on SUVs as well. So what are we waiting for, North America? Let's ban every... So that admittedly was kind of my opinion going into this story, but I think there's a less heavy-handed and frankly more important discussion to have here. We actually have a history of making cars much safer. In the 80s, governments introduced safety standards that required seatbelts, airbags, and crumple zones in our vehicles. Over the years, those safety features have reduced passenger fatality rates to about half of what they were before. Many are now calling for similar standards that require cars to have safety features for pedestrians. This could include alterations to the front bumper or technological solutions. The SUV you see in this video is equipped with sensors that can detect pedestrians and automatically apply the brakes. These pedestrian safety standards already exist in Japan and the European Union, but they're virtually non-existent in the US and Canada. The only line that mentions pedestrians in Canada's motor vehicle safety regulations is about how you can't have sharp mirrors. For decades, we've very successfully focused on improving the design of cars to make them safer for people inside them. But the rise of SUVs and pedestrian deaths really opens up a new discussion. Perhaps it's time we started thinking about the safety of those outside vehicles as well.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a plea to the UN Security Council today following allegations of Russian atrocities. The latest from the war in Ukraine after this.
It was here a week ago Friday that the immigrant smuggling ring, broken this week, staged its last operation. A black Corvette that had crossed the border earlier in the day and had spent several hours driving around to make sure that no one was following it, pulled up over here. At the same time, another smuggler's vehicle simply pulled up over here. The human cargo, a man from Indonesia, simply got out of the one car, jumped across the ditch, and got into the black Corvette. It was all over in 5 seconds. But the U.S. Border Patrol was waiting nearby, tipped off by the RCMP. The ring had been under surveillance for 2 years. Authorities had already watched 2 previous smuggling efforts.
780 and all units from 401 will be 1012 for a couple hours. No, right up here at the corner is where they were smuggled in the other night, the Chinese.
U.S. Border Patrolman Bill Johnson says this most recent ring strategy was pretty typical of other operations he's seen.
Usually the smuggler that crosses the border and is coming to pick them up will run up and down these roads to see whether our units are out, if they can spot them. Now, at the present time, we have a unit laid in on this location, and as you can tell, you can't see them.
Am I close by him?
He's watching us, I'm sure.
Increasing concern about organized smuggling prompted the Blaine Border Patrol to, a year ago, triple the manpower of its special anti-smuggling unit.
See Vancouver more as a hub where all nationalities flow into Vancouver, and from Vancouver, they spoke out to varying parts of the United States.
Smugglers charge anywhere from $4,000 to $20,000 for their services.
Where's your passport?
Their customers arrive in Canada with legitimate visitors' visas. Then they're supplied with phony U.S. documents to use once they're across the line.
We have 7 open cases right now, and if resources were not a problem, we could probably have double that many.
Police on both sides of the border anticipate even more smuggling activity in the years ahead. They acknowledge the odds are now and will be even more so in the future in the smugglers' favor.
Okay, sure. Yeah, solve. Okay, ready? Okay, right here. Here we go. I guess I should turn the camera on, shouldn't I? Yeah.
You're off from the center.
Okay, right there.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight for you on CBC Vancouver News.
I've talked with some business owners who own restaurants, for example, community restaurants, where they feel that they're going to keep that requirement for a period of time.
But as of this Friday, you will no longer have to show a vaccine passport at many indoor spots in BC. That relaxing of the rule comes as BC health officials introduce a 4th vaccine dose for people over 70, those in long-term care, and various other settings. The province says unvaccinated people continue to make up the largest share of deaths in critical care patients and hospitalizations linked to COVID. But Dr. Bonnie Henry says BC is in a good place with declining transmissions.
2 former members of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have said these are detailed roadmaps to meet our targets.
But the BC government, while touting the climate change plan, even as we miss emissions targets, and scientists warn we have less time to tackle the problem. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says governments have failed to meet their pledges. And Kelowna Mounties say a man is now charged with second-degree murder in the killing of a security guard at UBC Okanagan in late February. At the time, police say the suspect worked at the university. Victim Harmandeep Kaur was saving up for her education and recently got her permanent residency. Police say Dante Ognibeni Hepburn of Kelowna is set to appear in court tomorrow. Russia is once again denying allegations its troops brutally killed hundreds of civilians in Bucha. Today, in his first address to the UN Security Council, Ukraine's president presented shocking images of what he says his officials found after the town was recaptured. As Cameron McIntosh explains, Volodymyr Zelensky did not hold back his frustration with the UN body itself.
Well, today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky not only went after Russia, accusing it of genocide and war crimes once again, he also questioned the very purpose of the UN itself, showing a very graphic video to make his point. A warning, this video is disturbing. These images are from Bucha, showing dead civilians, including children. Zelensky accused Russia of using its veto power on the UN Security Council to neutralize the one body that's supposed to ensure world peace, and called for Russia to be removed from the Security Council itself, asking the members to question what the UN is really there for.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to close the UN? Do you think that the time of international law is gone? If your answer is no, then you need to act immediately. The UN Charter must be restored immediately.
The Russian ambassador to the UN sat through Zelensky's address. He called his accusations ungrounded and insisted Russia is liberating Ukraine from neo-Nazis, a claim flatly dismissed by Ukraine and its allies. Today, the United States said it has no question over who's responsible for what's happening in Ukraine.
His frustration, which we share, that Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We don't see that changing. And so what our objective is at this point in time is on a couple of fronts. One is to continue to provide a range of security assistance to Ukraine, directly to Ukraine, to the military that is serving boldly and bravely.
What we've seen in Bucha is not the random act of a rogue unit. It's a deliberate campaign to kill, to torture, to rape, to commit atrocities. The reports are more than credible. The evidence is there for the world to see.
The U.S. is pushing for Russia to be removed from the United Nations Human Rights Council, a call echoed today by Canada. Ukraine says such a move would be welcome, but will do little to stop the war. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Washington.
Well, the Russian army has withdrawn from Bucha. It leaves behind a disturbing legacy. Along with the hundreds of corpses discovered in that town, Ukrainian officials are also clearing explosives left behind from after the recaptured areas following the month-long Russian occupation. Katie Simpson has more, along with the personal experiences of people who fled their town to Lviv.
Bucha may have been liberated, but it is far from safe. Ukrainian soldiers have collected more than 1,000 explosive devices. These will have to be disposed of before those who fled can even think of returning to what is left of their home. The bodies of at least 300 people have been recovered so far, including 60 at a church.
Part of the people were probably Ukrainian ex-military or law enforcement, so they handcuffed them and executed them.
Natalia was trapped in Bucha under Russian control for more than 2 weeks with no power or water. She too saw a mass grave as she fled the city, along with scenes of hopeless desperation as described by an interpreter.
Ще я хочу добавити, she saw how bodies of people stay in the central place, and a lot of people decide, I don't know, maybe this is my brother, maybe this is my husband.
So people would be out in the main square?
Yes,
and
in the main square.
And they would see bodies,
yes.
And they would wonder whether they knew them or they were
yes.
related to them.
Yes.
And that. What was it like to go through that?
And Russian soldiers said, you cannot take this body.
Valery escaped Bucha with his wife and 2 kids 2 days after the war started. He's barely slept, and there's been little contact with friends and family back home. That is, until he saw this news report on social media. That's his good friend waving hello. Temporary relief faded quickly as his friend described nearly being killed.
He said that Russian soldiers take a hand, put on the ground, and won't fire.
So his friend was the
yes.
Russian soldiers
yes.
had
they
him
put
on the ground,
yes.
and they shot beside him.
Yes.
To honor the dead, the wounded, and this country's suffering, a few hundred people gathered in Lviv's main square for a moment of reflection, a moment to come together.
Despite the violence, despite the loss and the destruction, attitudes here are not changing. When you talk to people, they insist, they believe their country will prevail. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Lviv.
To another Ukrainian community ravaged by Russian shelling now, the town of Bortyanka, northwest of Kyiv. Senior correspondent Margaret Evans and her CBC crew take us inside the destroyed town.
This is the town of Borodyanka. It was one of the places that the Russians began bombing very early on in the invasion. And if you look around me, especially the building behind, you can see the force of that bombing campaign. We also then heard about Russian troops coming down from Belarus, and they occupied the city. And we are just seeing for the first time in several weeks volunteers coming in, rescue vehicles, ambulances, and people looking for family members or trying to see what's happened to their property. For the people who have lived here for the past month or so, the civilians, it has been extremely brutal in terms of their living conditions. It's cold and windy, as you can see. There is no electricity, no gas, no running water. People talk to us about living in basements, underground, wherever they could find them. A lot of their apartments had been shelled, and people just basically hunkered down underground. We met this afternoon a woman who hadn't heard from her children for over a month. She had no idea if they were coming for her or not. And when we were there, they actually arrived to take her out. They told us it was the first time that they were able to get into the village. They've been obviously worried. We're seeing those scenes here, of course, repeat. And you've got a sense of how much damage has been done. And of course, most people will tell you they know that it's not over yet. They're hurrying here during their time here because they want to get home before curfew. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Borodyanka.
When the COVID antiviral pill Paxlovid was approved for use among high-risk Canadians back in January, many thought it would be a game changer in the fight against the virus. But only a small percentage of Canadians have actually received it. Christine Birak tells us why.
If anyone should have been able to get Pfizer's antiviral treatment with ease, it's Amy Ferguson.
I am COVID positive. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I'm immunocompromised.
Ferguson was at high risk of ending up in hospital last week. Her doctor said she was eligible for Paxlovid. Then came days of confusion over testing and assessments to get the pills.
I'm hopeful that day 4, maybe, they will allow me access to treatment.
To be effective, Paxlovid needs to be taken within 5 days of developing symptoms, and there's other criteria that varies by province.
I was always concerned that the rollout was going to be challenging.
Experts say the hurdles for patients appear to be seeing a doctor, getting tested, and coordinating with a pharmacy.
We should look to overcome those hurdles in the next couple of months so that we don't undermine the access to this treatment.
And I think really what's going to help too is the antiviral pills.
While easing restrictions, politicians promised Paxlovid would protect vulnerable Canadians, and there's no shortage in supply. Most provinces have been given thousands of courses. Still, BC, Alberta, and Ontario each report dispensing the antiviral to fewer than 1,000 patients.
There is a big payoff to doing this properly.
Studies have shown Paxlovid offers an 89% reduction in the risk of COVID-19 related hospitalization or death against a placebo.
Communicating to patients that it's available, communicating to providers in terms of how to access it, that's the biggest thing.
Quebec has moved to dispensing Paxlovid more easily through pharmacies. Other provinces, including Ontario, now appear to be following suit.
I'm feeling much better.
Amy Ferguson got Paxlovid on day 5. She feels lucky to be sitting at home taking the antiviral pills, knowing she could have ended up lying in a hospital bed. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Instead of just keeping it simple, got him.
It is that sweet sound of summer right up there with lawnmowers and steaks on the grill. Yes, the crack of the bat could be heard at Nat Bailey Stadium today. Later in the show, a look at the Vancouver Canadians' return home after nearly 1,000 days away. And at 6:43, a live look at beautiful downtown Burnaby. Sunny, cloudy, and blustery on the south coast today. Johanna will have your BC-wide weather picture after this.
Our historic role has been to provide seed of Canadian tree and shrub species for anyone worldwide that's interested in Canadian species for research or educational purposes. Our second role, which really developed sort of in the early 2000s, was as a conservation center for species at risk. So seed collections from those species and holding that, the genetic makeup of those species for future restoration or research purposes. And we do our collections based on eco-districts that are across the country. So provincial borders, yeah, they are important, but not necessarily when it comes to collecting and preserving the genetic diversity of a species. So we use eco-districts, and our goal is to have 15 to 20 collections of each species from each eco-district in Canada where that species naturally occurs. So when you're talking 700 tree and shrub species, over 1,000 eco-districts, there's a lot of collections to be made to conserve and have that seed available for research and conservation purposes.
I still have to rub these down.
Once it's dried down, that's when we start our cleaning process. And our cleaning process, we have, sieves and tumblers and grinders and, everything from food processors, a whole range of different tools for cleaning the seed. And once it's clean, we also have, we're very fortunate, we just have a new X-ray machine. So throughout the process, we can be taking visuals to see what's in the seed, to see, okay, have we gotten rid of all the empty seed, all the parasite seed, all the damaged seed. Next thing we want to do is test the seed. So every seed lot that comes in is tested for germination or for viability.
My title, I think, is Seed Keeper. So I have been on a journey to find and save and share our indigenous seeds. And so it's been mainly food seeds, but I'm also interested in the tree seeds because trees are food too. This is an example, I think, where we have this concept called eduoptimum, right? Where we take the indigenous science and Western science. It means the two-eyed seeing. I think you've probably heard of it lately. But that's what this is. This is eduoptimum. This is application of it, because we're going to take indigenous knowledge of the trees and the seeds, and then take the science of, because the Canadian Forest Service, they've developed, they've perfected the way to collect the seeds and harvest and store these seeds. And so we take those two knowledge systems and combine them. You have a really amazing system for collecting seed.
Time for our BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. Hard to ignore that sunshine today, Joe. Quite lovely.
It was so needed, I think, and we've got a bit more of it in the forecast. It's been a rainy and cool past couple of weeks, so yeah, nice to see it behind that cold front. Let me show you where the temperatures are at right now. Again, a little cooler than seasonal. 9 right now at YVR, 11 up towards Sunshine Coast, hanging on to a 9 out towards the valley. Below seasonal for this time of the year based on our past couple decade averages anyway, around 12, 13 degrees for Metro Vancouver. Taking us through the overnight, it's a clear night for the most part. We'll see some high clouds spurt in, but that does mean a cool start to your Wednesday. This is all high cloud, I think the model's picking up, but we will see increasing clouds through the day. It's still a lovely Wednesday with temperatures hitting that seasonal mark in the afternoon. But by Wednesday evening, mainly overcast. A little system tries to skirt in, although for the most part hanging off until Thursday overnight. So this is all thanks to high pressure moving in behind that cold front for today, 6 around 4 tomorrow. Here's a pause Wednesday, 2 p.m. Already hightailing it though towards the Rockies, and that opens the door to the next Pacific system. And notice that is going to hit central and northern coastal sections first tomorrow. So places like Haida Gwaii, Prince Rupert, you have that rain which is transitioning from snow to freezing rain to rain as we speak as that warm front pushes in. But look for inland snow, Terra Stewart getting some good snowfall, skirting Prince George in the morning hours. And that line of precip you see just kissing Port Hardy for Thursday morning, that will eventually make its way down to Vancouver Thursday night. So that's our next rain in the forecast, Thursday night into Friday morning. 13 for Kelowna tomorrow, 12 into Cranbrook. And we're getting some good wind gusts tonight in the Okanagan. Still a chance of a thunderstorm late this evening, right across the spine of BC, all the way up through Prince George. Chance of seeing one of those thunderstorms clip community. Prince Rupert, there's the rain moving in for you nice and early, 6, and Port Hardy towards the end of the day, 6 for you as well. Okay, breaking down the forecast for us. Again, a mix of sun and cloud for your Wednesday, increasing clouds as we head into the afternoon. Warm for Thursday, but a few more clouds in the mix, and it's Thursday overnight into Friday that we get the rain. After that, yes, temperatures do cool down, but I am seeing more sun than not as we take an early look at our weekend forecast. And Dan, we won't talk about Tuesday yet. We won't talk about Bruno. We won't talk about Tuesday.
Bruno?
It's going to be a hit.
He's back? Or they're back? Come on.
Exactly.
All right, Joe, we wait with bated breath. Or not.
Who knows? It's going to rain on Tuesday. Let's just give it up right now.
There you go. Mystery solved, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. You're welcome.
Well, one day after becoming the company's largest shareholder, Tesla CEO Elon Musk will now join the board of directors at Twitter. Musk, who has criticized the company's commitment to free speech in the past, bought just over 9% stake in the social media giant yesterday. He's promised to make significant improvements to the app. He recently polled his 80 million followers on adding an edit button. Ottawa wants tech giants like Google and Facebook to compensate Canadian media outlets for using their content. As Travis Danraj tells us, the federal government has introduced legislation aimed at helping the financially struggling news business.
It's how millions of Canadians consume their news, online using platforms like Google and Facebook. Now the government wants big tech to cough up cash and compensate media outlets for using their content.
The news sector in Canada is in crisis.
New legislation introduced today would set up a system that sees digital platforms negotiate deals with news outlets. If an agreement can't be reached, it would then go to mediation and arbitration.
They continue to profit from the sharing and distribution of Canadian news content without really having to pay for it. So with this bill, we're seeking to address this market imbalance.
Australia has introduced similar revenue-sharing laws. Critics in that country and now here in Canada say smaller players won't have the same power as large organizations who in many cases don't put a price on their content right now.
What it effectively does is have the government intervene in commercial relationships led by the CRTC in a process that isn't particularly transparent and gives value to things that I think a lot of people would say don't have a whole lot of value at all.
Meta, the owner of Facebook, is reviewing the legislation. Google is doing the same, adding, quote, "We fully support ensuring Canadians have access to authoritative news, and we look forward to working with the government to strengthen the news industry in Canada." The Canadian Association of Journalists is concerned about staff reductions and all-out closures of news outlets creating so-called news deserts. We firmly stand by our long-standing view that any compensation gathered from tech companies should be substantially reinvested into the hiring of journalists and the production of news content.
I'm really concerned about whether or not we've got the mechanisms in place to oversee whether that happens.
A spokesperson for CBC said the corporation doesn't yet have any business arrangements with Google or Meta, but believes the legislation is an important step to ensure fair compensation for news content. Travis Danraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
Some helping hands have banded together to craft quilts for a very good cause. We'll tell you who's set to receive those blankets after this.
Well, the history of decorating eggs goes back centuries and centuries. Many cultures around the world have decorated eggs. Ukrainian eggs, known as pisanki, were decorated in pagan times with earth and nature motifs. They were used as talismans and for good luck. And when Christianity came to Ukraine, it became part of the Easter tradition. And the tradition has continued for over 1,000 years now. And we were going to do this for the Never Alone Cancer Foundation. And we started this whole project for 2022 before the war in Ukraine even started. And then when that happened, we thought, well, this was something we needed to address and to help support Ukrainian refugees.
Often when people are coming as refugees, they've left everything behind. And it's so important for them to know that they are welcomed, that they are supported, and that the community stands with them here at home.
They're all around us all the time, but how many clouds can you name? Clouds are accumulations of water droplets or even ice crystals in our atmosphere, and their overall shape is determined by wind, temperature, and altitude. So let's go over 5 common cloud types and what they mean. Cumulus clouds. Now these are those fluffy cotton ball clouds that you usually see in a lot of cartoons. Think of The Simpsons opening. Usually these clouds are fairly harmless, but they can grow to take us into our next cloud type, the dreaded cumulonimbus clouds. Those are our thunderstorm makers. Now these clouds have a lot of what we call vertical development, upward moving air that can mean lightning and severe weather. They are impressive to behold, but I generally give these clouds a wide berth. Cirrus clouds are much more friendly, at least when they're on their own. These are those wispy clouds that you see streaking across a gorgeous blue sky. They're made up of ice crystals high in the atmosphere. And while they're pretty harmless on their own, if you see them starting to build up, that can mean that stormy weather is on the way. Stratus clouds are pretty dull, literally. They're a solid layer of cloud that often don't have very many visible features. You can get stratus clouds at different levels of the atmosphere. Higher levels like cirrostratus or altostratus, those ones can indicate upcoming stormy weather. But low-level stratus is usually your typical overcast day, maybe delivering a drizzle or a flurry. From flurry to fury, our last cloud is pyrocumulus clouds, sometimes called flammagenitus clouds. Try saying that one 5 times fast. These clouds start with a bang. They form from wildfires or even volcanic eruptions. And if they get big enough, they can bring their own lightning, making a bad situation worse. So next time you're trying to figure out what weather is on the way to you, start by looking up.
A community in Manitoba is offering a warm and creative welcome to Ukrainian refugees. In less than a week, a group of mostly women joined forces to snip, sew, and stitch more than 100 colorful quilts. And every refugee will get a blanket in a range of patterns and sizes.
Calling all quilters, and I've got the response beyond belief. I thought of this. Thought it was something I could do. On Sunday, the Sunday the 6th, I was watching the news, and I thought, surely goodness, I can do something to help these refugees come into Canada. So I basically said to my husband, I says, we could make quilts and that. Like, I love doing them.
Why quilts? Why is that a nice thing, you think, to be offering people coming here?
It's warmth. And we're showing on the backs of all of them, we are putting, welcome to Canada, we care. And it is how we feel. And it's something that they can call their own when they do come to Canada. It's not something that will be left with the host family that are looking after them. It's something that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives if they so desire.
This little community just sort of come together in this huge way. And all these ladies do this in 3 weeks. Like, I think it's a good role modeling thing for the whole world to show of inclusion.
So what brought you here today?
Came to see the quilts. I worked with some of these people that quilted before, and I wanted to see what they were making and to look at the good work that's going to be sent and be available for the Ukrainians that are coming.
And what do you think about what you see?
They've done a lot of work. Beautiful work. We're so lucky we have this many talented people in the area.
I think it's a great thing. I think it's really good that we need to all come together and help.
Yeah.
And like the idea of a quilt being given to someone, what do you think about that?
So much comfort that comes into a gift like that, all the love that's been put into it and given. I think it's great.
Even like the young kids, they are going to be receiving blankets too. It's not just for one family. It's for everyone in that family. As many as we can give, we will give to them. And if they're sitting there watching TV or they're just reading a book, they've got this quilt to put around them and be comforted that someone does care.
And the boys of summer are back at Nat Bailey Stadium for the first time since 2019. Take a look. 963 days since the Vancouver Canadians played a game in Vancouver. The team saw a 2-season hiatus because of COVID, and extended border closures stopped them from returning last year. The return to the stadium is extra special for the Canadians' manager, Brent Lavallee. Before he took up a professional career, he called North Delta home.
Representing the Blue Jays, representing the Canadians, and being here in this city, in this stadium, it means a lot to myself, to my family, these kids that are here. Yeah, it definitely means a lot. This place has a special spot in my heart.
Home opener at the Nat is set for Tuesday, April 19th against the Eugene Emeralds. Good to see them back. Thanks for being with us on CBC Vancouver News at 6. I'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.